The rain kept falling, steady and relentless, as if the sky had no intention of stopping. Alice stood still by the window longer than she realized, her eyes following the slow path of each droplet sliding down the glass, merging with others, disappearing into nothing. There was something strangely familiar about that, how things slowly built up, collided, and then vanished without leaving anything behind. It felt too close to what her life had become. Outside, Chicago moved with urgency, people rushing towards somewhere, towards something that mattered. Inside, Alice felt like she was standing still while everything else continued without her. She wrapped her arms around herself, not because it was cold, but because she needed something to hold on to. The silence in her apartment wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, pressing down on her chest, making every breath feel slightly harder than it should be. The small space around her reflected a life that had slowly drifted away from control. A chair slightly out of place. A pile of unfolded laundry sitting in the corner. A table cluttered with unopened mail. None of it happened at once. It was the result of days, weeks, of quiet neglect, the kind that comes when your energy is no longer enough to carry both your responsibilities and your thoughts. She walked slowly across the room, her steps dragging just slightly, like her body was mirroring the exhaustion her mind refused to ignore. Every movement felt heavier than it should have been. Even simple tasks, standing, walking, thinking, required effort she didn't remember needing before. She reached the kitchen again, opening the fridge as if something inside might be different this time, as if the act of hoping could change reality. But it didn't. The same nearly empty shelves stared back at her, quiet and indifferent. She closed the door gently, not out of care, but because even frustration felt too exhausting to express. Her phone buzzed again from the other room. This time, she didn't even glance toward it. She knew the pattern by now. Notifications had stopped feeling like connections and started feeling like reminders, things she hadn't done, things she needed to do, things she couldn't avoid forever. Each vibration felt like a small demand she didn't have the strength to meet. So she let it buzz. Let it stop. Let it exist without her response. She returned to the couch, but instead of sitting properly, she lowered herself slowly to the floor again, her back resting against the fabric as if she needed the support just to stay upright. Her knees pulled in close, her arms wrapped around them, creating a small space where she could exist without feeling completely exposed to everything around her. It wasn't comfort, it was containment. A way to hold herself together when everything inside felt like it was starting to come apart. Her thoughts, however, didn't slow down. They moved quickly, jumping from one worry to another without pause, without mercy. It wasn't one big problem that overwhelmed her, it was the accumulation of everything. The bills she hadn't figured out yet. The reduced hours at work that left her constantly calculating how long she could keep going like this. The memory of her car refusing to start, a moment that felt small at first but had quietly become one of the biggest turning points in her life. That car wasn't just transportation, it was independence. And losing it felt like losing control over where she could go, how she could move, how she could respond to opportunities. It made her world smaller. And then there were the thoughts about herself. Those were the hardest to escape. They didn't come all at once, they slipped in quietly, disguised as logic, as realism. They told her she should have been doing better by now. That other people managed their lives more efficiently. That she was falling behind in ways she couldn't fix. The more she tried to push those thoughts away, the stronger they returned, repeating themselves until they felt less like opinions and more like facts. She tilted her head back against the couch and stared at the ceiling again, her eyes unfocused, her breathing uneven. There was a moment, a long, quiet moment, where she stopped trying to fight anything. She didn't argue with her thoughts. She didn't try to fix her situation. She just existed inside it, fully aware of how overwhelmed she had become. And that's when the realization deepened. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about work. It wasn't just about circumstances. It was about how her mind had slowly turned against her. Every challenge she faced was being amplified by the way she processed it. Every setback felt permanent. Every mistake felt personal. She wasn't just dealing with life, she was battling her own thoughts at the same time. And that double weight was what made everything feel unbearable. Her chest tightened slightly as she exhaled, and for a moment, she closed her eyes. Not to sleep, just to escape the constant input of everything around her. But even in the darkness behind her eyelids, the thoughts continued. They didn't need the outside world. They had already taken root inside her. That's when the fear truly settled in. Not the kind of fear that comes suddenly and loudly, but the quiet kind that grows when you realize something important is slipping away. She wasn't afraid of failing. She wasn't afraid of struggling. She was afraid of losing control of herself. Because if her mind continued like this, if every situation kept turning into doubt, every effort into exhaustion, then it wouldn't matter what opportunities came her way. She wouldn't be able to hold on to them. She wouldn't be able to act on them. She would stay stuck, not because of the world around her, but because of the war inside her. Her eyes opened slowly. The ceiling was still the same. The room was still the same. Nothing external had changed. But internally, something had shifted, not into strength, not into confidence, but into awareness so sharp it was impossible to ignore. She sat up a little straighter, her hands resting on her knees now instead of gripping them tightly. Her breathing steadied slightly as she focused on something simple, just the rhythm of it. Inhale. Exhale. No expectations. No pressure. Just one breath at a time. For the first time in what felt like weeks, she wasn't trying to fix everything at once. She was just trying to understand what was happening to her. And in that understanding, a small but powerful thought formed, not loud, not dramatic, but steady. If her mind had become this weak over time, maybe it could become strong again the same way. Not instantly. Not easily. But gradually. She looked around the apartment once more, seeing it differently now. Not as a reflection of failure, but as a snapshot of a moment in her life. Temporary. Changeable. Not permanent unless she allowed it to be. Her problems were still there. Nothing had been solved. But for the first time, she saw a separation between herself and them. She wasn't the chaos. She was the one experiencing it. That distinction mattered. More than she realized at the time. She slowly pushed herself up from the floor, her movements still heavy but more intentional now. She sat on the couch again, this time upright, her back straight, her hands resting calmly in her lap. The rain continued outside, unchanged, steady as ever. But inside, something had begun. Not strength. Not yet. But the decision to build it. And sometimes, that quiet decision, made in the middle of exhaustion, confusion, and doubt, is the strongest moment of all. The next morning didn't arrive with motivation. It didn't bring clarity, excitement, or any kind of relief. When Alice opened her eyes, the first thing she felt was the same heaviness sitting quietly in her chest, as if it had been waiting for her to wake up. The room looked exactly the same, the dim light, the stillness, the quiet tension in the air, and for a brief moment, she almost slipped back into the same pattern. The same thoughts tried to return, lining up one after another, ready to pull her back into that familiar weight. But something stopped them. Not completely. Not perfectly, just enough. She didn't jump out of bed. She didn't suddenly feel strong. Instead, she lay there for a few seconds longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, remembering the thought she had the night before, that small realization that her mind had become part of the problem, and maybe, just maybe, it could also become part of the solution. It wasn't a powerful belief yet. It was fragile. But it was there. Slowly, she sat up, placing her feet on the cold floor. Her body resisted, just like it always did, but this time she noticed it instead of reacting to it. That was new. Usually, she would immediately label the feeling as exhaustion, as a reason to slow down, to delay, to give in. But now she paused. Her mind whispered, "You're too tired. And for the first time, she didn't accept it automatically. She didn't argue with it either. She simply acknowledged it, and stood up anyway. That small action didn't feel like a victory. It felt uncomfortable. Forced. Almost pointless. But it was different. And different was enough to begin. The day moved forward slowly, but Alice moved with it, step by step. She didn't try to fix her entire life. She didn't create big plans or unrealistic expectations. Instead, she focused on something smaller, something she could actually control. Her reactions. Throughout the day, she started noticing how often her thoughts turned negative without her even realizing it. While brushing her teeth, her mind drifted toward worry about bills. While getting dressed, it reminded her of everything that wasn't going right. While preparing to leave for work, it questioned whether anything would ever improve. Before, these thoughts felt automatic. Now, she saw them clearly, and that awareness changed how she responded. At work, the environment hadn't changed at all. The same bright lights, the same repetitive tasks, the same customers moving in and out without noticing her presence. It was still exhausting. Still demanding. Still draining. But internally, something was shifting. When a customer spoke sharply to her, her first reaction, the familiar one, rose quickly. A mix of frustration, self-doubt, and silent anger. It was immediate, almost instinctive. But this time, she paused. Just for a second. And in that second, she created space. Instead of letting the moment define her mood for the rest of the day, she let it pass. Not perfectly, she still felt it, but she didn't hold on to it. She didn't replay it again and again in her head like she used to. It was a small change. But it saved her energy. That evening, when she returned home, she felt the usual exhaustion, but there was something else mixed into it. Awareness. She sat down with a notebook, something she hadn't used in a long time, and opened it slowly. The blank page in front of her felt intimidating at first. She didn't know what to write. Then she stopped overthinking. And just started. I feel tired. The words were simple. Honest. Real. She kept going. I feel like I'm behind in life. I feel like things are out of control. But today, I didn't give up. She paused after writing that last sentence, staring at it longer than the others. It didn't seem like much. But it mattered. Days turned into a quiet routine of effort. Not dramatic effort. Not visible to others. But consistent. Every morning, Alice forced herself to wake up a little earlier. Not by hours, just by minutes. Enough to sit in silence before the day started. Enough to gather her thoughts instead of being rushed by them. At first, those mornings felt empty. She didn't know what to do with the time. She would sit on the edge of her bed, sometimes staring at the wall, sometimes closing her eyes, sometimes just breathing slowly, trying to calm the constant noise in her head. Over time, those moments became important. They were the only part of her day where she felt even a slight sense of control. She also started walking. Not far. Not fast. Just walking around her neighborhood, especially on days when her mind felt too crowded. The movement helped in a way she didn't expect. It didn't solve her problems, but it gave her thoughts space to settle. Instead of feeling trapped in one place, physically and mentally, she felt like she was moving forward, even if it was just step by step. Some days, those walks were quiet. Other days, her mind was loud. But she showed up anyway. The real training, however, wasn't in the routines. It was in the moments when things went wrong. And they did. Frequently. One afternoon at work, her manager called her aside and pointed out several mistakes she had made during her shift. The tone wasn't kind. It wasn't encouraging. It was sharp, direct, and public enough to make her feel exposed. The old version of Alice would have carried that moment with her for days. She would have replayed every word, questioned her abilities, and let it slowly break down her confidence. And for a brief moment, she felt that same reaction rising again. The tightness in her chest. The rush of self-doubt. The urge to shut down. But then, she remembered. She stepped outside during her break, the cool air hitting her face, grounding her in the present moment. She stood there quietly, her hands in her pockets, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. And she asked herself a simple question: is this one moment, or my entire life? The answer was obvious. It was just one moment. That realization didn't erase the discomfort. But it reduced its power. Instead of letting it define her, she allowed it to exist without expanding it into something bigger. She returned to work, still slightly shaken, but not destroyed. She completed her shift. She went home. And that night, she wrote again. Today was hard. But I handled it better. That sentence mattered more than any success. Because it proved something important: she was changing. Slowly, almost invisibly, Alice began building something stronger than motivation. Discipline. Control. Mental resilience. Her problems didn't disappear. Her financial situation was still tight. Her job was still demanding. Her life was still uncertain. But her mind? It was no longer collapsing under pressure. Instead of reacting instantly, she started responding intentionally. Instead of believing every negative thought, she started questioning them. Instead of avoiding discomfort, she started facing it in small, manageable pieces. And with each small step, something inside her grew. Not confidence in the future, but trust in herself. She didn't need to know that everything would work out. She just needed to know that she could handle whatever came next. And that belief, built slowly, quietly, through repeated effort, became the foundation of her strength. The rain had returned again. Not as heavy as before, not as relentless, but steady enough to remind Alice of everything she had once felt standing in the same place months ago. She stood near the window of her apartment, her posture different now, her shoulders relaxed instead of tense, her breathing steady instead of uneven. The city outside still moved at the same pace, cars passing, people rushing, lights flickering across wet streets, but something fundamental had changed. This time, she wasn't standing still inside. Months had passed since that night when everything felt like it was slipping beyond her control. Back then, her world had felt small, heavy, and overwhelming. Every problem carried weight far beyond its size, every thought pulled her deeper into doubt, and every day felt like something to survive rather than something to live. Now, the problems still existed. But they didn't define her. Alice turned away from the window and walked slowly across the room, her movements calm and deliberate. The apartment itself hadn't transformed into anything extraordinary. It was still simple, still modest, but it no longer felt like a place of pressure. It felt like a place she could think clearly. A place she could reset. A place that reflected effort instead of exhaustion. On the small table near the couch sat her notebook, now filled with pages. Not perfect pages. Not polished or structured. But honest. Real. A record of days when she struggled, days when she resisted, days when she chose not to give up even when everything in her mind told her to stop. She picked it up briefly, flipping through a few pages, her eyes scanning words she had written weeks earlier. I feel stuck. I don't know if this is working. I kept going anyway. She paused on that last line, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the page. That was it. That was the difference. Strength hadn't come from sudden success. It had come from repetition. From showing up on days when nothing felt meaningful. From choosing control when chaos felt easier. From continuing when stopping felt justified. Her routine had become something steady, not rigid, not perfect, but reliable. Mornings were no longer rushed reactions to alarms and anxiety. They had become intentional. She woke up, sat in silence for a few minutes, and allowed her thoughts to settle before the day began. Not every morning felt calm. Some were still heavy. Some still carried doubt. But she no longer feared those feelings. She understood them. Instead of trying to eliminate negativity, she learned to manage it. When her mind drifted toward worst-case scenarios, she didn't panic. She didn't let those thoughts grow unchecked. She acknowledged them, questioned them, and brought her focus back to what she could actually do in the present moment. That shift, simple but consistent, had changed everything. One evening, as the sun began to set behind the buildings, casting long shadows across the room, Alice received a message from her landlord. The rent would be increasing next month. Months ago, that news would have shattered her. It would have triggered panic, stress, and hours, maybe days, of overthinking. And for a brief second, she felt that familiar surge of fear rise again. It was quick, sharp, almost automatic. But then, it stopped. Not because the situation wasn't serious, but because she was different. She sat down at the table, her notebook already in front of her, and took a slow breath. Instead of letting her thoughts spiral, she grounded herself in something she had practiced over and over again: what can I control right now? That question had become her anchor. She didn't waste energy asking, why is this happening, or what if this gets worse? Instead, she shifted directly into action. She wrote down options. Extra shifts at work. Looking for higher paying opportunities. Cutting unnecessary expenses. Exploring side income. Each option wasn't perfect. None of them guaranteed immediate relief. But they gave her something more important than certainty. They gave her direction. And direction replaced fear. Over the next few days, she followed through. She spoke to her manager about additional hours. She spent time searching for better opportunities, even if it meant stepping into uncertainty. She adjusted her daily spending with intention instead of restriction, making choices based on long-term stability rather than short-term comfort. None of it felt easy. But none of it felt impossible anymore either. That was the difference. Alice had stopped waiting for life to become manageable. She had become someone who could manage life. Weeks later, on a quiet morning, she stepped outside just as the sun began to rise. The air was cool, the streets still mostly empty, the city slowly waking up. She held a warm cup of coffee in her hands, standing still for a moment, watching the light spread gradually across the buildings. There was a calmness in that moment she hadn't felt in a long time. Not because everything was perfect, but because she was steady. Her mind, once filled with constant noise, had become clearer. Not silent, but controlled. Thoughts still came and went, but they no longer dictated her actions. They no longer defined her reality. She had built distance between what she felt and what she chose to do. And in that space, she found strength. She thought back to the version of herself who had once sat on the floor of her apartment, overwhelmed, exhausted, unsure if she could keep going. That version of her felt distant now, but not forgotten. Because she understood something important, that version of her wasn't weak. She was just untrained. Mental strength hadn't appeared out of nowhere. It had been built. Through discomfort. Through repetition. Through moments when quitting felt easier, but she didn't. Alice took a slow sip of her coffee, her gaze steady, her expression calm. She no longer needed motivation to keep going. She had something stronger. Discipline. Clarity. Trust in herself. She knew challenges would continue. Life wouldn't suddenly become easy. There would be new problems, new uncertainties, new moments where doubt would try to return. But now, she was ready. Because she had learned the most important lesson of all: you don't need control over everything in life. You only need control over how you respond. And that control, once weak, once unstable, once easily shaken, had become unbreakable. Before turning back inside, she whispered something quietly, not out of hope, but out of certainty, I can handle whatever comes next. And this time, there was no hesitation. No doubt. No fear hiding behind the words. Just truth.